Hello everyone, welcome to the Evangelist Nick Garrett channel for podcast number 9. Going to be a short one, just quick follow-ups on the last 2 videos and a few new things. First, I wanted to follow up on the video about the Nephilim that we put out earlier. What is today? Let's see. We put it out late last week. Couple interesting points, some great comments that are sparking these points, but an article came out that alleges that before the Supreme Court, the Smithsonian was sued by an organization for release of records that at the turn of the 20th century, they had destroyed the bones of giants, an overwhelming amount of bones that was discovered during the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries. Snopes, for what that's worth, I mean, they used to be kind of the go-to, but now, I'm not sure about this, but I believe they're viewed as very much of like a leftist-leaning, you know, if you actually scan what they verify and don't verify, they tend to support very left, liberal, democratic allegations, and they always decline and say false for anything centrist or right. That's been my what I've heard from a lot of people, and it does seem to pan out that way. But their allegations don't address the issues brought forth. They say, oh, we couldn't find this organization, the American Institute of Archaeology or something of that nature, because of how old they were. They make the point that nothing was technically classified before World War I, therefore blah, blah, blah. So I have these 2 conflicting sources. So I'm looking at source 3, source 4, source 5. Gaia actually had a really good take on it. And that is that obviously, like most things, there's kernels of truth at the core, and there's, from those in power, the perception, creation, and, etc. So anyway, this is worth looking into. I've linked the articles for everybody. Today I wanted to talk about, I've been reading in 1 Peter a lot this week. Chapter 2 particularly, it talks about, in chapter 1, Peter talks about how the gospel was preached to us as the enduring word, that we're going to be living before God our Father. Talks about a heavenly inheritance. And then in chapter 2, we get that chief cornerstone, right? That to the people who God chooses to save, the word is food, milk to meat, nourishment, growth. But to others who are disobedient, it's a stumbling block, a stone of stumbling, a rock of offense. And that's kind of important for what we're talking about next. We're talking about naturalism based on the society we live in. Like, we came out of our talk about Baal with the idea that culture was the modern Baal. We found Baal defining people, places, and things, an abundance of them. And in attempting to tie that to the idea of modern culture, I figured we probably need to define our terms a little clearer. So let's say culture can include, but is not limited to, Hollywood, academia, media, groups of people as far as political identities and social persuasions. And then if you look at the idea, moral relativism was one of the results of modernism and postmodernism. We now live in an age of naturalism, naturalistic materialism, which means, I'll read you the definition. This is from the apologetics glossary in the back of Just Tell Me the Truth About the Future of Christianity. Naturalistic materialism holds to the view that there are only natural and no supernatural elements. All things can be explained in naturalistic terms. So obviously we believe that there is supernatural. Now, the reason supernatural, God, Bible, everything can't be analyzed in this lens of naturalism is because by its very nature, naturalism that says everything can be explained in natural terms, even creation, doesn't have a place for it. It doesn't define it. It doesn't acknowledge it. And that's interesting because We'll take evolution, for example. There has long been the debate between evolution and creation, and it's a settled science and this and that and everything else. But the reality is you can strip all of it down and not even argue, just not even argue, but say and put the things in front of yourself. Does naturalism adequately define the world we live in and answer the important questions like, why am I here? What's the purpose? What's wrong with the world? How can what is wrong be made right? Does naturalism answer those things? And all the things under naturalism, evolution, Darwin's natural selection, naturalism, rationalism, does all that answer better than the supernatural idea that it's a God, a heavenly creator, and that his word endures, the Bible, right? And that it actually has an impact on our life? I don't think it is. I don't think you can say naturalism is a better explanation for everything that goes on. Particularly, and this is a key point for me that I ask myself, this proves that there's definitely a cosmic war going on between good and evil. If there is not a cosmic supernatural war, would our systems of understanding things specifically aim to deny or edge out God? We're not just saying, hey, we came up with this other way of analyzing things called naturalism, and boy, it sure gives a great explanation for most things. It does give an explanation for a lot of things. And a lot of it makes complete sense. And like everything, I think there's truth mixed in it. But it's not a better explanation than the supernatural explanation that there is a God, there is and should be an objective set of morals that all of society abides by. I mean, for me, Genesis 1:1, think of how powerful that is. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. En el principio creó Dios los cielos y la tierra. It's amazing because it includes, right in that first sentence, time, space, and matter, as if it, and the creator, as if it predicted that it was going to be challenged one day, the very first sentence of it. Now, I would not waste any time at all arguing with people over, is it literal 6 days, or, the vestigial tales. I mean, it's just not worth arguing because we're supposed to evangelize, right? In 1 Peter, the end of the first chapter says, now this is the word which by the gospel was preached to you. And at the beginning of chapter 2, it says, therefore, laying aside all malice, all deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and evil speaking. That means, we're not supposed to, in my opinion, be, getting lost in the weeds with everyone. We're supposed to keep our eye on Jesus Christ and evangelize that way, right? No malice in it, no deceit, no hypocrisy, no envy. Just straight out, celebrate the mystery of God. One thing naturalism has done to us is it's made us think we have to find some amazing, deep way of getting through to the naturalists. Well, think of it. There's not even a mechanism anymore in the way we analyze things academically for there to be a supernatural definition of anything. It doesn't exist in it. Anyway, and how would we define supernaturalism? God working in our lives, right? Silently, like Elijah. Elijah went to Mount Sinai looking for signs. God talked to me, but it was in the silence of Elijah's heart that God spoke. God changes us and edifies us over time, quietly, meekly, which is amazing when you consider the born-again experience, the nature by which we come to him. He takes a bat to our legs and we feel the Holy Spirit. And, the few times in our life we are legitimately blessed enough to truly feel the Holy Spirit, it is, talk about being naked before God. It's like literally having a bat taken out your knees and you're on the floor, and you don't want to move and you just feel this overwhelming love. It's pretty cool. So anyway, yeah, the Smithsonian article and the Nephilim, right? How that ties into the giants. One time it might be fun to talk about the Book of Mormon has a book of Nephi, which I know this has been covered, I'm sure, by other people, but I don't think that's a coincidence. I really don't. Anyway, yeah, I mean, if you just, so the concept behind talking supernatural versus natural means of explaining the universe, of explaining the creation. You can even make the argument. So the question for me was, does one better answer for why we're here and how than the other one does? Yes, and I think it's supernatural. And I believe it has the support of a lot of scientific laws. I think it has the support of mathematics. You see Fibonacci sequence all through it. I'm not a master of understanding sacred geometry and mathematics, but Fibonacci sequence, I'll put a link in the description to maybe where you can read about it. And the golden mean, which is present in architecture, is also present in creation. That's remarkable. Plus again, naturalism has that aggressive bent toward wanting to undermine God purposely, the scientific laws be damned. Forget about the fact that many of the things that we allege in the naturalistic model are invalidated by the law of irreducible complexity, right? Meaning in predicting, right? The likelihood of certain things. The likelihood of certain things it predicts is way outside the law of irreducible complexity. Basically, such a vast number that we can't even fathom it. But it gets a pass on everything, Every time something is discovered, it doesn't have to fit in the timeline. We can just keep expanding the timeline, right? Endlessly. And that, I think, is how it becomes like its own religion. I have no problem with the scientific method, right? As long as we understand it versus the evidentiary method. You're not going to use the scientific method to go to the Bible. You're going to use the evidentiary method. Historical sources, primary sources, secondary sources, who wrote what when, are there strong chains of provenance? That's how you look at the Bible. You don't look at the Bible and form a hypothesis and do a series of tests. So it's just senseless arguing that has put both Christians and non-Christians on bad footing to even talk with each other. We should be able to talk with each other. The idea that only people who are atheist, agnostic, are free thinkers, or that they are the only ones that do critical thinking. That's not true at all. Look at what we're doing. Truth First Christianity. We're purposely looking at and saying, is this tradition or is this real? We're trying to find the objective kernels of Christianity that are there and point out everything else that is tradition, as subjective belief, right? And we're doing a lot of critical thinking. Certainly there are people who follow that are blind, but there are also people who have had Jesus Christ take their legs out with a bat and introduce himself. And then it's undeniable. Anyway, so what else? Let's see. So Baal. We talked about it in the last podcast, and we've been exploring the idea that it's cultural through Hollywood academia. And I wanted to point to something like today on one of the Facebook pages I follow of the early church, somebody wrote a great article about the First Council of Nicaea, which was the church's first ecumenical council. An ecumenical council is ideally a gathering of leaders from the entire Christian church, the whole thing, right? It rarely happens, but that's what it's supposed to be. For example, when the First Council of Nicaea happened in 325 AD, there were 1,800 invitations sent out, but you only ended up with about 280 bishops there. The sources range in number from 250 to 320, so we'll say 280 in the middle. So then you have 280 people making decisions for the whole church when there's 1,600 other bishops that didn't come. Right from the start, of course, you're going to have conflicts. But think of what Hollywood did in the Da Vinci Code. There are people out there today that are convinced the First Council of Nicaea made up the Bible. There are 20-some canons, maybe 20, 18 to 25. I can't remember off the top of my head. Canons, meaning here's what we did. Not a single one of them addresses the books of the Bible. The first canon comes from Jerome, about a year after the Second Ecumenical Council, which was called the First Council of Constantinople, In 381, Jerome sat down and put together the Vids Latina, which was the skeleton of the Bible that we know today. Canon, right? The Bible was put together. Before that, there were hundreds of different books that were used in sacred texts. That's a subject for another day, but the point I'm getting at is, the Da Vinci Codes caused everyone to believe that at this first council, they made up the Bible and organized certain books and threw out all the others, and the other ones that got thrown out contained the truth, right? That's not Jesus in that picture. That's Cesare Borgia. Okay, fine. But what about all the pictures that predate Cesare Borgia, who was alive in the late 1400s and early 1500s? Like, what about all the Byzantine art of Jesus and what he looked like? Okay, maybe Cesare Borgia had features of, okay, whatever. But it's not a huge conspiracy like everybody makes out. The other thing, the idea about Jesus' divinity, right? Christianity was made up at the First Council of Nicaea. The question was never about whether or not Jesus was divine. It was about how we define his divinity. The idea of hypostatic union was developed. How much of him was spirit? How much of him was human? The ideas of, really every ecumenical council, just a surface look verifies the divinity of Jesus because they were trying to understand it. And that makes perfect sense when you think of celebrating the mystery of God, as it says in the book of Timothy. God, Timothy's great. He also says, not following science so-called, right? And you wonder what that means. Well, it means like naturalism, rationalism, all the things that are before us today. Don't follow science so-called, but remain the course. Just appreciate the mystery of God, right? And that mystery, in every ecumenical council over hundreds of years, they're trying to say, how is it that he's the Son of God? The question is not whether he is or not. There's way more complicated questions than whether or not Jesus is divine. For example, the whole Arian controversy, not Arian as in Hitler, but Arian as in Arius from Alexandria. The whole deal was Jesus created or not, or was he existent eternally with God from the beginning? I think there'd be a lot more followers of Arius today than would likely admit if we really thought that deeply about some of these things. Anyway. Hollywood, it's like part of that deal of why, if there's no cosmic war, would our systems of understanding specifically aim to deny and edge out God? I love edge out God because the initials are ego, E-G-O, edge God out, right? Ego, our egos. Like Genesis 11, the Tower of Babel, glorify ourselves, edge God out. Anyway, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I had. So like what I'm watching right now. I found a channel of a journalist that lives in Israel, happens to speak English, and he goes on the street with questions that people post on Facebook. And it's fascinating. He asks Jews, who is the Messiah to you? And it's eye-opening. It is so eye-opening because we're not hearing from theologians on either side. We're hearing from the average everyday people, and it's really surprising what people have to say in Israel when they're asked about Jesus Christ. I'll just leave it at that. Maybe we'll talk about it separately in another episode. So lastly, if anybody happens to be listening that isn't a Christian yet, or that's on the fence, or that has this idea that everybody that's Christian is just blind and following blindly, and oh my gosh, if you just used critical thinking and dug for the truth, then you'd know. Well, we're plenty critical. We're definitely thinkers. We're readers. There are many types of Christians. There are people who started going to church with their parents and just never questioned it, never left. There's a large portion of people who went, questioned it, said, this is bogus, left, and then later in life came back after life had kicked them around a little bit. And there's some people who are born again, meaning they're not even looking for it. So many people, you don't here's what I want to get to for the people that are new. You don't have to have a Bible and start reading the Bible to be saved. All you have to do is ask God with a humble and contrite heart, after acknowledging that you see how sinful you are, right? We have to start with this idea that we are ultimately broken as individuals, that we are burdened by sin, that Jesus Christ is the way we are saved. And we say a simple prayer like, God, will you please show me that you're there? I am contrite in heart. I'm sorry. And I would like to have a relationship, to kind of see you, to know if you're really even real or not, to know why I'm here, what my purpose is, what you want from me. If it's possible that I could be saved, please introduce Jesus to me. Something like that. Or even mine was like totally desperate. I don't know if you all know, but I have other videos that talk about it. This was years and years ago at this point, but I was saved in a very desperate circumstance of being in drug rehab for like the third time and getting on my knees and just saying, God, I don't even know if you're there, but if you are, just please help me. And it was the most desperate moment of my life. The please help me wasn't surface. I mean, I was just like totally broken as a person, and God did. God answered. God showed me how naked I was, showed me how sinful I was before him. And I didn't even ask for this. It was just like the scales fell off my eyes. My eyes were opened. Then I went on the journey of digging into the Bible and learning who this amazing God was that saves me. Think of Moses, right? What is that strange fire up there? Talking about the bush, and it's kind of like that. It gives, when it happens right away, things in the Bible that you kind of knew from the, little children's stories popped out, like nakedness, Adam and Eve naked. And you're like, what does that even mean? And then, you understand it, because to feel naked before God is like just to be totally stripped down. You can't hide from God, You can't get in a comment battle with God on social media. God can strip us down to the core in a split second. And once you get saved, I hate using this nomenclature because I think it's worn out, and unfortunately TV evangelists have just destroyed us, and people hear that language and it makes them angry and they get turned off by it all. But when we get saved, God changes us over time. The word in Christianity is edification, or teaching, like a growth and development kind of thing. And it doesn't mean you can't search. For me, the idea that I had this experience that was so vivid and tangible and real, it gave me the freedom to totally rip this stuff apart academically and intellectually. Because it was a thing like, well, this answers whether God is real or not. Then, okay, well, if God is real, then what God says must be real too. And you have the freedom to totally look under every rock and not be afraid. You're going to find tradition after tradition that is totally bunk and bogus in Christianity. That's why so many people are angry. They think it's God. They think it's Christ. They think it's salvation. It's not. It's denominations. It's churches. It's perverted televangelists. It's everybody thinking they have the answer. Everybody creating different orthodoxy and saying, no, it's this way. No, it's that way. And it's a huge turnoff. And I don't believe it's part of some big conspiracy. I think humans are wicked, and I think it's the byproduct of our human sin nature. But you can come to Jesus Christ just yourself, in the car, in bed at night. Now where I'm at in my Christian walk, years down the road, I don't pray unless I'm on my knees. That's a personal decision I make because I think it's important to end my day reminding myself humbly of where I'm at and where I've come from, and that every person should be on their knees before the living God. You don't have to. Just talk to God in your head. And it's like, hey, are you there? If you're real, please. Like, I'm a skeptic. I don't believe at all. But if you could show me anything, we're not asking for God to flip on the radio, not signs and wonders and stuff like that. But you'll know. If God is trying to get into you, you will see it. You'll know. There'll be no question. Now, why would I encourage you to do this? Like, what do I get out of this? Oh, it's all the money. It's all the money off my YouTube advertising. I don't make a damn thing off of YouTube advertising. And it would be fake to be like, oh, I care about all human souls and I just want to see everybody saved. There's a lot of people I want to see saved, but I'm a human being, which means I'm just as fallen as the next guy. I'd be a liar if I said that. But once you get down the road and you can look back and you can see where so much of this was how it went and how it unfolded, and then you think of the people you know that are so skeptical, which the amazing thing to me is it's like atheists spend so much time denying a God they don't believe in. It's almost like it shouldn't be like I don't believe in God. It should be like, no, God, I will not. You know, that's basically what atheism is. No, God, I'm not going to face you. I'm not going to be accountable for my actions to the invisible man in the sky. Screw you, Dad, for making me go every Sunday. I am an adult. I make my own decisions. Well, you reach a point in your life where you have to look at what it is. And there are many people who find that the human condition, we are 50% flesh, we are 50% spirit, or 100% flesh and 100% spirit, however you want to say it. And we must have spirituality in our lives to be healthy. And everything out there wants to offer you the spiritual remedy for human sin, but there has only ever been one that's actually works. And that is Christianity. You can learn a lot from many of the other things, but they're not going to save you. They're really not. And most of my motive comes from things I would tell my younger self. That's really kind of what it is. And the people who are further down the road, 20 or 30 years, they probably look back at people my age and our age and whoever's listening and say, well, I could tell you a thing or two. I bet you can. It's a journey. The story, the fable, Aesop's fable of the tortoise and the hare is really an excellent analogy for Christianity, in my opinion. You got the fast rabbit that looks at the turtle and says, I got this. I'm faster than a rabbit, or I'm faster than a turtle, and the turtle starts at the beginning and just keeps moving on the racetrack straight and keeps going and doesn't stop ever, goes slow as anything, but doesn't ever stop. The rabbit goes a while, sleeps, goes a while, parties, goes a while, eats, takes a nap under a tree, and by the end lost sight of the turtle. And the turtle made it to the finish line. Anyway, hope you all have a good day and a good couple of days. Not sure. I think the rest of this week I'm pretty busy, so I might not put out another video till Friday or Saturday, but I hope you all are well, and I look forward to talking to you. Again, thank you for listening and discussing in the comments. Talk to you next time. Thanks.